Everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Ahmad Lomayar. On this video we're gonna continue with the XML firewall. On this video we're gonna create the static service. I already created a backend service. It's a simple service which is, you just click on it. Let me show you. It's a still a simple loopback service where I create I use the transform to just like manipulate the data that it come on this base. The same thing that I used the previous video. If you watch the previous video, you will see it. How we create this one and where we get that one from W3 school. And we place it right here, and the URL is backend URL. We call them backend URL. So that's the service. The response would come as a XML, and let's check and see how the response would come. And that's the, let's say I want to use backend, and the port is 58. We gave them a unique port, and the URL is, you see, they gave us this response. How should we create a static a service that we call this one from the another service? Like we will invoke the services. How should we invoke that one? We just click on that. Let's create another XML firewall, and this time we will create a static. By default it comes as a static backend, and we will name it static back end example of XML firewall. Let's keep this big name, and this is the static backend. We will leave that one, and we will call this from right here. We will get the same IP address. We need to put the same IP address on a static. If you want to know more about static type of service, is a XML firewall communicate with a server that is identified by a remote IP address and remote port number. So that I already show you the service I create. Right now I want to invoke it from right here. I will need to have the remote address and port number, and the port was 2058. The unique port address I place it right here, and the response will be XML. So that's our backend. If you look right here, they say backend. This is the backend which we invoke this service from regular static services. So this is our front end. We gave them the whatever IP address, and we just pick the whatever is they gave us by default, and we take the response the way it is. Now we come to a process policy. We click on a plus sign, and we want to add, let's add static back end style policy. We will call them this name, and we wanna create two rules. One rule is we already know what both direction do. Like requests come up, they will forward it back. But right now we wanna create client to server and server to client. On a static we should create that one. And when say client to server, we creating a rule. Is the function. We will go to action. On action we wanna create a let me create a matching URL. On that I will say backend. I will provide same URL backend and apply. Say we must give the name backend static URL. You could name it anything. And now save it. Done. We create the URL. Now you could use the transfer, but I don't want to use any transfer. We already invoking the service, that's why we just send a service on that URL. They will forward it to the backend service. They do the manipulation of our data and come back. We will create another rule. This time we will do it from a server to client. The first rule was from the client to server. What it mean, like requests will go from our to the server side. Servers do the manipulation and send back requests. When the requests come back, we will get it on a server to client. Then you could manipulate it if you want. Let's say for this one I will pick default one, any URL. But you could manipulate the response come up. You could manipulate it right here. But for the first time I will leave it blank. Then the next video or on the next try I will manipulate the message the way we want it. Like let's say save, message goes and come back. Let's apply and apply. So we're gonna save it, like everything is fine. Recheck response in XML. There's a front end, there's a back end, and we're gonna call this port number, then invoke this services from right here. So and save. Once you save it, let's go and test it. So we're gonna test it. On that one was backend, and the port the backend port was 58, but this port is 48. If you check the service we create 48, we're gonna call this one to invoke this one. We will say call, but this is the same URL we put it. That's okay. The endpoint URL, we're gonna put this service and call. Once I call, you see the response is 200, and it called this host. You look, we call this host, and this is the ID they assign it through the backend firewall to the static firewall. You see there's a backend firewall. We call this service from this service. You see we create this static service, firewall service, and we call that one. And there's a client IP, and it is text XML and the IP, and you could warning static firewall. They give us a warning, and that see the answer is like that. We could manipulate that one. Let's manipulate the answer when it come to us client to server. We could manipulate it.